10 games in, the Washington Wizards obviously have plenty of problems on an 8-game losing streak. But what's the biggest one? We're going to try to find that out today. Greg Finberg joins the show. Stick with us here on Locked On Wizards.
You are Locked On Wizards, your daily Washington Wizards podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
DC family, you're locked on to the Washington Wizards. We're your part of our family. We thank you for making Locked On Wizards your first listen every single day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 podcast network in the nation. Alongside the DC sports content creating Savannah Abdullah-Ayubi, I'm Ben Schrober, and I cover all things DC sports for 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Today, we are joined by our pal from Bullets Forever and the host of the Wizards podcast, Greg Finberg, fan favorite amongst the Wizards fan base for sure. Greg, we were joking about it off air before this, but between the Wizards and today the Commanders embarrassed again, defense is very hard to come by for both of our teams right now.
I mean, yeah, the Commanders, I don't think they actually got a stop defensively. Like, it just felt like you knew that Joe Witt had no game plan and really had no ability, whether it was personnel-wise or game plan-wise, to stop Detroit. It seems like that's the case with the Wizards on most nights. Like, you know that they're going to give up 115, 120 points. So we're going to get into that. It's never great when one of your teams is doing it, let alone two. And it's not like the Caps are really streaking like they did last year. Obviously, we know about the Nats, so not the most fun time, but it's why we're here to talk about it. So can't wait to talk.
Yeah, no D in DC like Greg mentioned. And what are the odds that we lost to Detroit football and we're probably it's gonna be a tough matchup tomorrow against the Detroit Pistons. And right now the best team in town is the DC Spirit, so it's tough right now.
It is. So last night in the loss to the Mavericks, it was the more competitive Wizards team that we saw against the Mavericks previously, where the Wizards got the one win they had. It's now 8 losses in a row for this Wizards team, and the majority of them have been pretty non-competitive. It was good to see them compete a little more yesterday on the defensive side of the basketball, albeit Dallas, one of the worst offenses right now in terms of offensive rating and efficiency in the entire NBA. So many problems right now on the defensive side of the basketball, but Greg, you touched on this in your pod yesterday, the Wizards podcast. If you guys want to check that out, and we got the coverage of it yesterday. Bijan Todd asked the question of the blunder at the end of the game. There, head coach Brian Keefe telling Kyshawn George to foul when they did not need to. They could have had a chance to get a stop on defense. They ultimately didn't do that. They foul, and he said after the game, "I messed up. I misjudged the clock." I just wanted to get your take on that whole situation and maybe get a little bit more into what you've noticed from Brian Keefe over the first 10 games of the season here.
I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, I think I did like 25 minutes last night on my pod. I think 12 I spent just like analyzing the play and just like trying to figure out what Brian Keefe was thinking in the moment. Because when I recorded, it was before he had come out and said to Bijan's question, like, I misjudged. I told Kyshawn to foul. That's on me. It's great that he can take accountability for it. And it's one thing if Kyshawn was the one that fouled and he shouldn't have, like, that's understandable. But for your head coach to not know time and situation, to not know the difference in the game and shot clock, I don't know if he forgot that after the offense shoots and if they miss, they get their own offensive rebound. The shot clock resets to 14, not 24. So like there was 23 seconds, I think, at the time on the game clock, and it reset to 14 on the shot clock. Brandon Williams took a 7-foot jump shot, didn't make it, got tapped out to Najee Marshall for the rebound. So 23 seconds left, 14 on the game clock or on the shot clock when it resets. That's a 9-second difference. That's plenty of time. You have a timeout as well. You're down 108, 105. All you have to do is get a stop. And then you can go down, and instead of having to make a shot and then foul, all you got to do is make a 3. You could even go for a quick 2. There's so many different things that you can do. But I guarantee you in that situation, if you ask 100 NBA head coaches, what are you doing? They're not fouling. They're playing that out. And Brian Keefe, he admitted it. That's great, but it's unthinkable. I think you called it unfathomable, Ben, for an NBA head coach to just lose track of the situation, especially when you have a young team. Like I mentioned, if Kyshawn fouled him there, that's a really bad play, but he's in his second year. Like Bub, Alex, they're all young guys. If Trey had done that, it's like bad play, but you can learn from it. But for a guy like Brian Keefe that's been around the game for decades at this point, he's supposed to be the guy navigating this young group. through these situations in clutch time, and he completely sold it. He sold the game. And, would the Wizards have won? They still needed to get a stop. They still needed to make a 3 or at least tie the game. Then they would have probably had to win it in overtime. Like, there are these hurdles, but for your coach to not understand that, it's just like, how does that happen? And how do you, I get it. He took accountability for it. That's great, but it doesn't matter at a certain point. And I think it's compounded, right, when fans are already, annoyed at his rotations, had his seeming inability to adjust. It seems like Brian Keefe can't adjust to any type of adjustment. Like, we see, like, Champagnie doesn't play the first 5 games for the most part. And now he's kind of like a starter. And even last night, he was a plus, I think, if I pull up the box score. He was one of the few players that was a plus in a big group of people that were minus. Champagnie was a plus 11, but played 12 minutes. So it gets to a point where you're kind of just sat there like, that's a really bad mistake. But when your rotations are bad, when your adjustments are non-existent, and then you can't even figure out time and situation, what are we doing here? Especially on a young team that needs that coach to step in. I've run out of ways to describe it. It was, head scratching at the time. And I mean, clearly it was on him. So he took accountability. Hopefully he's better moving forward, but you can't have that in the NBA. You can't have that.
Yeah, no, 100%, Greg. I agree with you. It's frustrating because Ben and I always preach that JC, all he does is play winning basketball. And if he can't impact the game scoring, he's definitely going to go out there and get rebounds. Like a game recently where he had 11 rebounds at 6'6", 6'5". I mean, he just goes out there and hustles. I was going to ask you your thoughts on the minutes of Malachi Branham getting minutes early on. We didn't see much of it compared to the last 4 or 5 games this season, but now he goes up and given the assignment of guarding some of the Mavs players. Just your thoughts on that. And I think the game before was Jameer Watkins against Cleveland where he had the assignment of guarding Donovan Mitchell.
I'm glad you brought up Brandon. Like, he was actually one of the few players that I thought played well last night. And even when he played, I know he played against New York, but only 4 minutes. But against Boston, like, he played the final 17 minutes of a blowout loss, and he had 10 points and 3 boards. I thought he was pretty solid. He shot above 50% in all 3 of his appearances this season. The biggest thing is that he wasn't even a consideration for the first 5 to 6 games. And now he's not a staple of the rotation, but like, it's just weird seeing him not play the whole first half and then get inserted in the third quarter against Boston. And then even against, a team like Dallas, he's playing a couple minutes in the first half. It just kind of everything goes back to Keefe and the rotations. And like, I get it. You have a young team, you're moving pieces around. He's had some injuries, obviously, with Bilal being out. Kyshawn missed a game. I get that, but he has seemingly no grip on the rotations 10 games in, whereas most teams do. Like I mentioned, you're seeing Champagnie start, but really not play much in the second half. And when he doesn't start, he's not a part of the rotation. And then you got a guy like Branham that comes in. He's played okay, but is he part of the rotation? Because next game, if he doesn't play, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Anthony Gill gets some minutes tomorrow. Who knows? But the point of Branham is, like, I think he's played well, but it's hard for a guy like Branham to get that synergy or chemistry with that group of guys, or to kind of build that momentum for himself when he doesn't even know what his role is. He doesn't know when he's going to play. Like, you should be ready, like he has been when you're called upon. I would just prefer that through 10 games you have a steady 8-9 man rotation versus just going into games not knowing who's going to play and who's not going to play. I don't think that's the optimal approach.
All right, Greg, 46 field goals per game the Wizards are allowing right now. That is good for worst in the entire NBA. How much of this do you chalk up to an issue with Keefe and his rotations, or just the personnel simply not being built to compete on that side of the basketball?
We talked about the Commanders early, and I think this is actually a good example because, Joe Witt has been bad. I think he's been awful. He's their defensive coordinator. If you look at the personnel out there, the injuries, like, that's not a winning defense. But at the same time, they should be getting at least 1 stop per game. No matter the personnel, they're NFL players. It's the same thing with the Wizards. The personnel is bad. And whether you think that's by design, which you're probably right, or because it's a young team or whatever, outside of Bilal Coulibaly and Kyshawn George, I'm not sure they have really any good on-ball defenders. Like, Alex Sarr has been awesome in rim protection. I tweeted out today, Sarr has 9 straight games with 2 or more blocks, which is the longest streak in the NBA. I believe he has 7 blocks over his last 2 games. He's not the problem. Neither is Bilal, neither is Kyshawn. If Kyshawn stops fouling, then he certainly isn't the problem. But apart from those 3 guys, I don't think there's anybody on this team that I'm like, yeah, I would trust him with the game on the line. I want him in my closing lineup. Cam Whitmore has some good defensive games, has some bad ones. Champagny is an all right defender, but I would consider him to be great. You have 3 truly good defenders on this team. So based on that, it's tough for Brian Keefe to put together a winning defense. At the same time, I don't think this defense should be bottom of the league bad. Like Ben mentioned, giving up the most field goals a game. And it's also, if you watch, like the stats are one thing. They're giving up 128 points per game, which is one of the worst lines at this moment in NBA history. That's one thing. But if you actually watch the games, like there are so many, examples of guys just out of place, out of rotation, missing assignments, backdoor cuts. That's on coaching. So I think it's twofold. I think the personnel is bad, and it's hard to blame Keefe for that. But I've also had some questions about the defensive buy-in and the effort level I've seen on that end, the IQ of these players being in the wrong spots and missing assignments. So you can blame Keefe, you can blame the rosters. Like it doesn't really matter. The defense is way worse than I think it should be. And ultimately, when you have a young roster that's going to probably fall on the head coach. So I get it. I think it's warranted. The pushback that fans have had about the defense, because there is no resistance. Like you play against a team like Milwaukee in the first game, Giannis is going to have 35, 10, and 10. They're playing KD in a couple games. He'll probably have 30. It's just like they know what they need to do, and they just can't do it. So I don't know who you would assign the blame to, but I don't think it matters. The defense is atrocious no matter who you blame.
Yeah, 100%. You want to see the team compete on the defensive side of the basketball, and there's some short bursts where they really do it well and they force the other team to shoot poorly, especially from behind the arc. But obviously defending the perimeter has been a huge problem for this Wizards team, and hopefully there are some fixes that we can see moving forward. Is this hindering development? We're going to tackle that when we come back from the break here on Locked On Wizards. Your ambition just met its match. With Robinhood, you play for the win. Not just on game day, every day. Locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks, EFTs, options, futures, and crypto all in one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself. Expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache between waiting in queues, surprising fees, and prices that jump right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. Recently, I used Game Time to grab seats for a couple of games, and I had great seats in minutes. I love that what you see is what you pay. No hidden fees at checkouts. Plus, I could see exactly what my view looked like before I bought tickets with the in-app seat view feature. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go with Game Time.
Yeah, Greg, you mentioned before we went to break Kyshawn George's foul trouble, and that's a common theme that we've seen so far early on this season. And obviously, he's an aggressive defender, but should this be a thing that Wizards fans should be concerned about? Because during those crunch time moments, we want him to be out there, but when you're an aggressive defender like Kyshawn, that might be a problem where those calls are going to be always called on you, especially when you're going up against guys like Cooper Flag or just young scorers in this league. How worried should Wizards fans be about potentially Kyshawn George being out because of foul trouble every single game?
I think it's a fair point. Like he's averaging nearly, I think it's 4.7 at the moment, like nearly 5 fouls per game. He's fouled out 2 times through the Wizards' first 10 games. I think he's played in 9 of those. So, pretty much, a fourth of his games he's fouling out to begin the season. That's not good. I don't think he would have fouled out last night had Brian Keefe not told him to foul. So take it for what you will. But the aggression is good. Like I like his defense. I like how he pushes up on his matchup and he makes it difficult for them. I think the key for him, and it was the key for Denny Avdia when he was here as well, was just like, don't bail them out. Like he's always in the right spot, but he reaches, he overextends, and he fouls. And it seems like to this point he hasn't learned from those mistakes. And it took Denny a while to learn as well. But you'd see a lot of times like Denny would put his hands up on defense. Like, I'm literally here. I'm not gonna foul. If he makes it, he makes it. I think Kyshawn's got to learn from that, because by the end of Denny's time in DC, he was an awesome defender. He wasn't fouling as much. And I think that development trajectory is what you're looking at for someone like Key, who is always seemingly playing good defense, and he's there, he's in the right spot. He does too much. And I think over time he'll learn from that. So I'm not concerned. Like, if you listen to any Brian Keefe's press conferences, like he's been asked multiple times, he continues to maintain he's not concerned. So I agree with Keefe on that part. I'd rather him be aggressive than be a bad defender. Obviously, he's got to be smarter. It's only his second year. He's 21. Like, he'll learn with time, obviously. But once we're in like game 60, and if this is still an issue through, his first season and through a good part of this season, then maybe you can start to get concerned. But if I'm a Wizards fan, I'm like, yeah, he's fine, but he's one of the real only players on this team showing any ounce of defensive energy and actually playing hard on the defensive end. So if he's going to foul, like, that's not ideal, but I'd take that effort in that type of defense over a lot of what you're seeing from most of the other guys that are playing meaningful minutes for this team.
Greg, one thing that stands out to me, despite being pretty non-competitive in a lot of these games, is that Alex Sarr has really blossomed here in year number 2 into quite the offensive threat for this team. He's looked great in the paint. He's continued to protect the rim really well with the stat you brought up, the multiple blocks in 9 straight games. He seems like kind of a testament to what this rebuild really is in terms of player development for a guy who improves year over year for this organization so far. So it kind of begs the question to me, despite the team being non-competitive, how much does it really hinder development? Is it kind of a fine line thing, like some guys don't develop certain ways because they're not being competitive, but some guys can overcome it? How do you view that?
I think if this continues, you'll just see it take longer for them to put it together. I think it'll take longer for this group to kind of realize this is what it takes to win games and sustain that throughout a season. We were talking before, I pulled up the Thunder, because I think a lot of people, I think, Ben, you mentioned the Pistons, and maybe if you'll get into that in a second, but a lot of people say, well, Will Dawkins is from that Thunder tree, and they have a lot of guys from the Thunder, and it's like, that is the kind of pinpoint where you want your rebuild to eventually get to the point where you're just the best team in the league and everyone's chasing after you. And like the Thunder rebuilt, but they went 44 and 28. I don't know if that was in the shortened season. But then in the next season, they won 22 games, and that was the 72 game season. So they probably could have won more. Then they won 24 games, and then they won 40 games. And then last year, what did they win? Like 68 games, 67 games? I'm not sure, but they were never as bad as the Wizards have been. Like they never lost 15 games or 18 games. Like that wasn't where they were at. They were always competing. And even when they were losing games, like I remember the Wizards at that time were trying to compete with like Kuzma and Beal and even Porzingis. And like the Thunder, when they weren't even contending, they would push them to the brink. They beat the Wizards on several occasions when they weren't even trying to contend, because they were well coached and they were learning those winning habits. Even when they got to the playoffs that first year, they couldn't beat Dallas because they just didn't know what it took. So I think it might be a point where it's not going to mean the Wizards don't get to that point. It just might take them longer to figure that out, because it's not easy to win games in the NBA, let alone enough to make the playoffs and to be a good seed. And when you're losing games, like most of these fourth quarters are just non-competitive. Like it's you can turn the game off and you're like, they probably just lost by 20. They were down 15 entering the fourth. It's non-competitive. And before that Dallas game, there were 4 games in a row where they were trailing by 15 plus points entering the fourth quarter. And at a certain point in the fourth quarter in those 4 losses, they were down by 20 or more points. 2 of those were 30. So it gets to a point where, yes, it's concerning, but I think it's not going to mean that they don't get to the pinnacle if that's the ceiling. It just might take them longer to reach that point, which is obviously, you would like to avoid that if possible.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up another guy, Greg. Cam Whitmore, arguably his best game as a Wizard so far, 19 points. And one thing that I loved about it was not just the points, but the zero turnovers. Because right now, this Wizards team leads the league in turnovers. I think they're dead last. I think right now, I don't like because that Cleveland game he had 5 minutes played, and throughout the beginning of the season it's like up and down, and there were minutes where Jameer Watkins was getting it, Malachi Branham, and Wizards fans are just concerned, and he has quite the fan club as we've seen in our comment section. So from right now, for where you stand with Cam Whitmore, do you see a possibility where he cracks the starting lineup, or do you think we'll see more games like it was against Cleveland where it was 5 minutes a game, or more like that performance that he had against Dallas?
I mean, it's weird with Cam because, like I mentioned before last night, his minutes had gone down. It was like 16, then 11, then 5 against Cleveland. And he played 29 last night. Like you mentioned, Abdullah, 19 points, which is a Wizards high for him. He did it efficiently as well, 7 to 13 for the field, made 3 of his 6 3-point attempts. And like you said, it was under control, didn't turn it over. Picked his spots, I think, when to be aggressive and when to kind of pull it out, which is what Brian Keefe has probably been stressing to him. But I mean, to your question, will he start? Like, there's been multiple injuries or illnesses at his position. With Middleton, who's missed a couple of games, Bilal has missed 7 so far. Kyshawn George has also been out, and Brian Keefe went to Champagny instead of him, and even Bub Carrington got inserted back into the lineup, and you didn't see Cam Whitmore start. So I would assume if you asked Keefe, he'd just say, "I like Whitmore off the bench," and he kind of likes that scoring burst, which I actually think is probably best. It's the same with Kispert as well. Those are two guys at the forward position when you've had 2 injuries there, and they haven't started over a guy like Champagny who wasn't even part of the rotation. So I think Keith's thinking is like, well, I want to keep my bench unit intact, and I'd rather just take a guy like Champagny and put him in with the starters because I think he and his play style could probably fit any group versus a guy like Whitmore that maybe needs more space and more freedom to work like he has with the bench unit. So I don't think he'll start anytime soon unless they have, unfortunately, more injuries or more illnesses or whatever, because I think Keefe just likes him off the bench more.
All right, let's take one more quick break. When we come back, I kind of want to play a little bit of buy or sell here with our guy Greg Finberg. We'll be back on the Locked On Podcast Network. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, buy or sell here with our guy Greg Finberg. This is Locked On Wizards, part of the #1 podcast network in the nation, the Locked On Podcast Network. Greg, Alex Sarr, I saw a couple tweets floating around a couple days ago. I think our guy Damo might have posted one of them referencing Alex Sarr's BPM was a top 20 level in the entire NBA right now. And if he's playing at that pace, it's almost like an argument that this guy's playing at an all-star level right now. And maybe he's not going to get that recognition because this Wizards team is as bad as it is right now. So buy or sell, Alex Sarr is an all-star player in the 2026-27 campaign.
That's tough. I would sell it because if we've seen anything, number one, even when the Wizards are good, it's hard to get their players into the All-Star game. It's a popularity contest. Number two, I also don't think they're going to be that good next year. I think they'll be better than this year, but I think it's going to take some time, and maybe they'll win more games. But we've seen in recent years, like Trae Young was averaging like 25 and 13 and wasn't an All-Star because the Hawks just weren't that good. You saw it. I mean, Bradley Beal was averaging 30 points, and they didn't get him in the All-Star team because the Wizards were a 35-win team. So if they win 35 games next year, I think people would probably be like, oh, like that's an improvement. So I think Sarr will be good enough. Like I think if you compare his numbers to some guys even this year, if he keeps this up to make the All-Star team, you could be like, well, you can make a case that Sarr's having a better year, but you always have to factor in, are their teams good? I think in recent years, that's become more important to voters, especially in the media, not as much fans. But you also have to factor in the popularity contest that just is what the NBA All-Star game has become. So I think if you're talking like numbers wise, like I think next year he probably should deserve to get in. Will he get in? That's another story. And kind of based on trends, I'd sell it. But he's been awesome. I definitely am buying Alex Sarr. I said in the preseason, because a lot of people were like, who do you think is the best player on this team? And I got some pushback because I'm very bullish on Sarr, and I was even after the summer league start and last year, because it's so rare for a guy that's 7'1" to move the way he does. Like, he has guard skills, he can handle the ball, he can run in transition, he can make threes like you've seen this season. He can body down low, but he's also an unbelievable shot blocker. He's a really great on-ball defender, can switch 1 through 4 realistically, and you've seen not 1 through 4, 2 through 5. But he kind of has it all. So am I buying Sarr? Yes. Am I selling the All-Star? Probably, just because of how it's trending.
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree with Ben here. I think Alex Sarr is really good, but I think the wins total, the popularity contest is going to affect him from being an All-Star next year. But yeah, I think Ben always preaches his shot diet and how it's gotten so much better this season compared to last season. Because last season there were times where he would just shoot a lot of threes and just not go inside, but his mid-range shot, that fadeaway shot, is getting really, really nice, and his touch around the rim is great as well. I want to transition to a different guy. I know his stock is at an all-time low right now, Greg, but Bub Carrington hasn't been the best start for his sophomore campaign, and it's kind of crazy because I've seen some Wizards fans on social media saying that he should be demoted to the G League, which, in my opinion, is too much of a stretch because, again, I think that could shatter a young guy's confidence. But how much of it is on the coaching staff for putting him in this position? Is it more on Bub? Because I think this past game against the Mavericks finished with 9 points, but again, very inefficient, and the 5 turnovers. It's just his role here in Washington, like, is it going to be figured out sooner rather than later? Because I still think he's only 20 years old and he's still freaking young. And I still think he has a chance to be a really good player in this league.
Yeah, the stuff with Bob is tough because like you can't sit here and say that he's playing well. That would be a false statement. He's playing really bad actually. It's just how much do you want to buy into that? Like, again, it's a 20-year-old point guard. He's a young 20 at that. He's realistically only in his first year playing point guard. He played a little bit last year without Poole, but Poole was a ball dominant guard even when Bub played with him. So you got to factor in a bunch of that stuff. He's young. He's only in his second year. He's learning a new position. I also don't think the coaching staff, like you mentioned, has done him any help. Like, he was your starting point guard at the beginning of the season. Like, that was you traded Jordan Poole for the cap relief, but I think a big part of that was like, okay, like, now we don't have a ball dominant guy taking away all these opportunities. Now we can have Bub as our point guard. And they moved off of him in, what was it, 6 games in because he hadn't been playing well. Like, I get that, but you're not trying to win games. It's like, well, how are you going to be this proactive and say, well, he's not getting the job done and we're going to pull him. But you're allowing a guy like CJ McCollum to play through the first 8 games and be one of the worst players on the team. And CJ's been great the last 2 games. Like, maybe if you kept Bub in that role, he would have figured that out. But you have him as that starting point guard, then you yank it away from him because he's not playing well. And then you got him off the bench for 2 games. You let him start, and then the next game he's back on the bench. It's like, how do you expect him to find a rhythm, to find his role, to learn this position when, he's starting as your point guard for a bit, and then he's coming off as like this volume scorer off the bench, and you're playing some point guard, playing some non-point guard with people he doesn't play with often. Like, it's on him as well, because even last night he had 4 turnovers in 9 minutes, and he's getting in the air and making pretty bad passes. There's a couple times on pick and rolls where I just think he premeditates it. He's like, I'm coming off this screen and I'm just going to throw the lob to Bagley. Like, there were multiple times where it just there was nothing there. He threw it into 2 Mavericks because they were blanketing Bagley instead of saying, oh, I'm open, let me take the mid-range, which he did last year. So I think it goes both ways. Bub certainly isn't there yet, but I don't really understand why this not front office, but this coaching staff was so eager to rip those keys away from him because he wasn't playing well as a young point guard learning the position. Like, did you expect him to come in here and dominate? Like, no, we expected him to play better, and he's not there. But at a certain point, the coaching staff needs to say, hey, like, this is the guy we want to be as our point guard. We're not trying to clearly win games. I mean, you see how we're blowing all of these leads. Just let him play point guard. If he's bad, he's bad, but give him a longer runway than 6 games to prove it. That would kind of be my point there.
On the idea of the coaching staff here, Greg, real quick, buy or sell, this is Brian Keefe's last year as the Wizards head coach.
Don't do that to me, Ben.
It's just, food for thought because, we had the conversation where you don't really expect the team to be that much more competitive next year. Maybe they're a little bit more improved and they make a push to get over the hump from where they are now. But with that being said, do you feel like they move on from him?
At this moment, yes. He's under contract. Like, I understand that, but I don't know how you can look at this season and say, yeah, like, let's run it back with this guy. I think the development has been great, but at a certain point, how much of that do you stock up to Brian Keefe? Like, I think the head coach can only do so much. You have a bunch of other coaches that should probably be getting credit for the fact that Alex Sarr looks the way that he does this season. Kyshawn George and his improvement. Trey Johnson's looked solid in the beginning of the season. I think you can move on from Brian Keefe without moving on from the development that you've gotten. And if you certainly look at his coaching decisions and the poor rotations or questionable rotations to begin the season, the seeming lack of adjustments, he has a good game plan. We saw that with Wes Unseld Jr., but to go from, these 10-point leads to these 20-point deficits in the span of a quarter. I have a thread on Twitter where I'm just kind of documenting it. There's been multiple times where it's a 15+0 run and you got a Keefe timeout at 7-0 and then a Keefe timeout at 15-0. And it's like these adjustments aren't working. And you factor in the blunder he had at the end of the game. It's like, is this guy the best guy to take this group through? And if you don't think that's the case and you're trying to maybe compete next year, I think you get somebody else to lead the way. I think Brian Keefe has done an okay job, certainly a good job with development, but it seems like coaching-wise, adjustments-wise, late game time and clock situations where coaches are needed, he's missed the mark to this point. And so obviously he has 72 more games to prove it. They're not going. I don't think they'll fire him mid-season. But if you ask me now, I'd be surprised if this continues that he's back next year. And if he is, then I think it would be the wrong decision.
Yeah, especially since there are some guys out there like Mike Malone and Taylor Jenkins that Wizards fans are just salivating over to become the next head coach here. But Greg, before we end this show, do you think the Wizards break their 16-game skid record of last season, or do you think they find a way to break it these next couple of games? And if so, what game do you think it will be?
We talked about this earlier. I think Brooklyn, if you can't beat Brooklyn, you got some real issues because, and it's funny saying that from a Wizards perspective because they're also really bad and they also only have one win. But the Wizards are home. They've played competitively against a lot of teams. It's actually, I was looking at, I think they haven't won a home game since like April 3rd of last year or something like that. Like it's been a while. They're 0-5 now at home this season. So it's not like it's been like the easiest road for them, but if you lose to Brooklyn, that's 11 straight losses, and then you're probably worse than every other team you're going to play the next couple of games anyway. I would say it's going to end. Like I think they'll beat Brooklyn, but like I mentioned, if you can't beat Brooklyn, I think you got a lot deeper problems than just being a tanking team. That's for sure.
And I've heard, sorry to cut you off, man, before you head out. I've heard that Brooklyn fans are saying they whiffed on all 5 first-round picks, so we'll just have to see.
Oh, man. All right. Always a pleasure, Greg. Thanks for coming on as always, dude.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. You guys are great. The show is great. Make sure you guys keep listening to these guys. They're doing great work, especially the coverage, on site too has been awesome this season. So again, thanks for having me on, guys.
Appreciate that, my friend. That is Greg Finberg, host of the Wizards podcast. He writes for Bullets Forever. Be sure to check out all of his stuff. One of the top guys you can follow along with in the Washington Wizards season. We'll thank everybody for making Locked On Wizards your first listen every single day. For your second, check out the Locked On NBA Fantasy Basketball podcast hosted by Josh Lloyd, the best fantasy basketball show you can find. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network in the nation. For our guy, Greg Finberg of Bullets Forever, for my co-host, Abdullah Ayyubi, I'm Ben Strober, DC family. We sign off.